just had a thought.
Give it to me.
Hotcha girl, Raygun, MMA battle. Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger,
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
It's a slogan. We should put that on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift.
Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Andy, how you doing?
Pretty good, though must admit, going through a bit of an existential crisis.
Oh, you finally getting a new haircut?
Can't afford to have haircuts in this economy.
Get the ball out and the wife.
No, it's just got to let it grow as long as possible, and in between. But yeah.
Well, what's going on?
Well, our podcast is called The Middle, right? And we do. I think both you and I kind of rail a little bit against the idea that certain topics are taboo, or that, like maybe rail against the impulse to shut down conversation, right?
Yeah. And
yet I don't know. We've had a couple of conversations. So last week we did the episode on the riots in the UK, and I must admit, like I felt like for part of it, maybe we were kind of, I wouldn't say like on different pages, but we certainly were like, I think you wanted to frame it in a certain way, and I was like, have none of it, because I just didn't even want to go there. And then that was the first thing. But then, like, we had a conversation. So, like, Donald Trump and Elon had their little bromance on Twitter or X. And, we had a conversation.
The ball cupping ceremony.
Yeah. And we had a little bit of a chat about it. And I think you were kind of trying to have, like, a good faith sort of interrogation of the conversation. But I just think, I just was like, no, like we can't take any of this seriously. I'm not having a serious conversation about anything in this 2 hours of fucking nonsense. Like, I'm not even entertaining it. And I felt for a moment a little bit like the pro-Palestinian, on-campus protester that does not want to concede anything about maybe that, like, there's part of the Israel side that is correct at all. Like, I felt... a little bit like that, and as opposed to like that, hang on, well, there is a perspective on both sides. And I felt myself not only wanting to shut down any kind of meaningful conversation about it, but actually still feeling right about that, even in light of everything that we're about here on The Middle. So I want to challenge myself a little bit. So yeah, that's my existential crisis. Like, I'm not sure, like, have I reached my limit? It's just that everyone else has a different limit.
Look, it was quite surprising, because when I think about our back catalogue and all the conversations that we've had about tricky topics, you haven't really taken that approach. Like you said, you haven't really left this idea that if there is parts of a conversation, a tricky conversation, that are worth picking over, then that in itself is a worthy goal. But there's something about, I think. Well, let's just stay on Trump for a minute, because I think he's the easiest for people to empathize with. That, I don't know, it was just like I was trying to pick a few. I use the analogy of listening to Trump's 2-hour rambling conversation with Elon, and saying that, look, it's like a bag full of moldy apples, right? And you're kind of reaching through each to see if, like, pick out the good apples from the bad apples, and you can't tell until you pour them all out, right? But I think that for you, it's more just like, no, I'm not playing this game. It's beyond the pale for me. Like, I'm not interested in. It's almost like, to me, it felt like, Andy, that you would kind of have this view of, like, if I follow you down this road and have this conversation, then the terrorists win. In this case, Trump wins, right? Because that's exactly what you want me to do. You want me to get lost in and somehow go on this re-education journey with you and get re-radicalized in why all these things that I'm saying are true. And I get that, but like I said, it's very antithetical to how we usually talk together. That you're trying to shut the conversation down rather than following me down a few dark rabbit holes.
Yeah, I think maybe the analogy I would use is it's a little bit like, I mean, you used like moldy apples, but it's a little bit like watching Raygun's performance at the Olympics and saying, well, she did one good handstand, so can we
Did someone say that ever?
well, maybe not, but the kangaroo hop move or whatever she did was kind of okay, you know.
Disrespectful to our Indigenous population.
So as a result, like that one tiny second of like breaking that she did was kind of okay. Like that we should like somehow talk about that as opposed to the other 99% of it that was utter shit and disrespectful to people who can actually do this form of dancing. And in the same way, Trump is just like, he's utterly unfit for the job of US president. So any other kind of conversation you want to have about him or about even the topics that he wants to talk about, it's just a distraction or it's taking the bait. And I think maybe another way of presenting, like you sort of framed as like not going down this like re-education journey, how important it is the table that's set, right? So you know, like here's a like a dinner. We're all going to have and consume a meal together, but like we can have that like in an Indian restaurant, and we can have like we can share our dishes, and we can, you know, have the papadums and the naan breads and the like.
It's a very white Indian meal. Oh, it's butter chicken, please.
The overly spicy food that, like, you know, or we can have like our own individual plates at the like the bistro at the pub, and we can have, you know, this guy's having the, you know, the schnitzel and fries or whatever, and the other one's having, I don't know, soup or, you know, the soup of the day, fish of the day, whatever, right? But they're very, very different experiences. And if you have the conversation according to the way Trump is setting it up, it's going to be geared towards his interests. It's going to be framed in a way that it's totally serving his interests. And I think that's what I'm railing back against on. Like, it's like, I don't want to have any kind of conversation about this topic, about this issue, in the way that Donald Trump has set it out for us to have, right? Because he is utterly unfit for the job. That's it, full stop. There's no part of like this conversation that you need to continue. But just to be clear, that's not to say that you can't then have a conversation about like the failures of, you know, the Democrats, and like you can, that they've got issues too. Of course you can have that conversation, but just not in the way that Donald Trump wants us to have that conversation.
Look, let me reflect on two things, right? And the way that we communicated in the last week, right? I think that there's a few elements, I think, that comes along with the frustration or the reactivity to not wanting to have that conversation. One was that you lose the ability to separate the ideas from the messenger. So, and I think that I'd like to explore this a little bit more, but if you're honest with yourself, you're getting kind of pissed off with me interrogating that line of questioning, because and a similar thing maybe happened, a little bit of transference happened in our last conversation about the UK riots, that it was kind of, you know, like by trying to find the kernels of truth in what essentially could be a propaganda or a conversation that has been hijacked by a more extreme element, the person that's trying to do that ultimately gets vilified, i.e. me, where I think something that, you know, we both usually prize is this idea of separating the person who's providing the argument and the argument itself, right? So I think it's a little bit of that, and I don't know, like how pissed off did you feel yourself getting angry with the situation?
Oh, not angry, but like I think what I would say is that, let's use the Trump example, right? Like maybe if the starting point is we're both very clearly of a view that like this guy should not be president, and that he's orders of magnitude worse than Kamala Harris, let's say, as the alternative, and that that's like a shared understanding. At that point, I think you can kind of engage. All right, but let's look at maybe if the conversation was, let's look at the vulnerabilities in the Kamala Harris campaign, right? Okay, from a policy point of view, right? He's raising issues around border, he's raising issues around inflation and cost of living and, you know, whatever, all those things, right? So let's talk about those as like an interesting academic exercise, but with a shared understanding that Trump's a fucking moron, right? And it's absolutely outrageous, right? That we're in a situation where he is like, a chance to be the next president again, right?
Yeah.
If that's the framing, then I think you can move to that next step. But I don't know. I not to put you on the spot, but I do get a sense that you're not like as black and white on Trump as I am.
No, I'm not. So I think he's unfit for office. I will agree with you there. But I think that there's been a significant amount of dehumanizing that you've done to Trump. I don't think he's an idiot. I don't think he's stupid. Right.
This is the thing, right?
No,
this is the bit that hits my nerve, is like the notion that like people have dehumanized Trump.
Yeah, I don't think he is, mate. I think like he has a certain amount of instincts, and he has the presence like to get things done in a different way to what we're used to seeing around given our bureaucrats, right? And so I kind of think that you can share a different view on Trump, right? You can kind of see, I'm someone that sees his particular unique set of skills and off-kilter operating style, but still acknowledge that he is deeply flawed and bordering on, a character that is not fit for office. And I think just the main thing is he's a pathological liar. And I think that says a lot about character, and obviously, like if you're someone who doesn't participate in the transition of power, that's like that rules you out for office, right? So I agree with you there, but I think that some of the other elements, the other charges that you put, I don't quite agree with.
I mean, you mentioned like pathological liar. I don't think that's actually the flaw of Trump. I think the flaw of Trump is that he's like an egomaniac. Like his defining ideology is the ideology of Donald Trump, right? It's all about him. It's all about his prestige and his like how great he is. It's not actually about the people. He's actually got really dangerous ideas, right? In a lot of different fields. And he doesn't take advice. He doesn't believe other people have any competence whatsoever. I mean, you can tell that from his staff, like turnover from his staff and people he's sacked and all that. And I just think that's the flaw. And that's like at an institutional level, it's a flaw. And I think you don't see that. When I have a crack at the man, it's, for me, that's core to like, it is the man that's the flaw. And I think he's everything that, and more. Like, I think he's been given a generous run, if anything. There's
a couple of things I think that the reason I say that you've dehumanized him. I mean, a couple of episodes ago, we were doing the thought experiment about whether the world would be better off if Donald Trump was dead, right? And so I think that what needs to go along with that, and I said, well, why would that be? And the kind of charges or the resume that you put forward wasn't convincing to me, right? Like, and I understand, like, I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. He's a hard person to work for. He's an egomaniac. He doesn't take advice well, self-centered, blah, blah, blah. I think you'd find all politicians and all leaders are like that. I think that saying that he's just like an idiot and all these other charges, like I just it doesn't. To me, it's like it's a reactive emotional response, which is not usually what happens.
Okay, can I be very clear? Because I don't think that's right. What you've said is not right. I don't think it's right of me, and I'd push back against that. The way government works in most places, apart from authoritarian dictatorships that tend to be really fucked places to be and poorly governed, the way those places tend to work is you have distributed power. You have distributed decision making. You have people making decisions based on their visibility over their little patch that they look after. And you have people taking advice who are in the actual decision-making role. So you have people, whether it's the President of the United States of America or it's the head of a government agency, these people take advice and they act on advice and they respect advice. Donald Trump does not take advice. He does not listen to other people. He looks for people who will give him some sort of a framework for what he thinks instinctively is the right thing to do. But inevitably what Donald Trump wants to do is utterly fucking the wrong thing to do and absolute nonsense. And just to be clear, when we talk about Donald Trump, we're not talking about like, oh, okay, yeah, he's like at the margins, he's a little bit like of an awkward figure. We're talking about this is the guy who effectively is eroding the very things that have delivered the whole global economy prosperity over the last 30, 40 years.
Give me an example, because you've laid like the most intense charges and with no basis at the moment.
Okay, so
just pick a few.
All right, let's say, for example, the notion that we need to have trade restrictions on Chinese imports, and let's have now actually a 10% tariff on all imports to America, not just Chinese ones, because the US has has a trade deficit. We need to fix that. So let's have a tariff. Let's go back to having tariffs. Tariffs are the most economically damaging thing that any country can, like, basically the worst policy move a government can make. But you know what? Trade tariffs are popular because you can tell a story about how it's great for, domestic industries.
Now tell me something he did. Pick me something he's done in the 2016.
Trade restrictions on imports. That's starting a trade war with China. Like, this is something that governments have been trying to avoid for years and years and years. And he's, I'll walk straight into that one.
Now, pick me something he's done in his term.
This guy has made massive policy missteps.
Just pick me something he's done in his term. And
yeah,
just lay
that's
out
what he did in his term. I've given you. I've given it to you.
Yeah, what in particular? Which
trade? He's fucked the whole global trade system. He started a trade war with China.
All right. Can you concede anything? Okay.
Which is probably the biggest thing he's done of any consequence, frankly. His policy story is the reason I'm so passionate against Donald Trump.
Would you concede anything that he did was positive?
Within the whole bunch of things that he would change, there's probably a subset of those things which I would be open to, whether it's like deregulating, whether it's cutting taxes, whatever, right? But the issue is that even though there might be a subset of those things that I would be open to, the rest of the things that he's doing, they're actually really bad things to be doing. They're things which are destabilizing. They're things which will lead to like long-term consequences.
Why do you think I asked that question?
I don't know.
I asked that question because of how like this topic has caused you to kind of only see one side, right? And like it's going back to that thing of where you're pushing against not entertaining the elements because you've already kind of he as a man is beyond the pale, right? And I think that's why I say you can't even really admit those other elements, right? Like
no, but I think you're mistaking my distaste for him because he's like a buffoon, right? I don't mind buffoons. There's plenty of buffoons that I kind of don't mind, right? But if you're a buffoon and you've got good policy instincts or you want to do things that I don't mind, then that's not going to rule you out for me. Let me be clear about that. So I want to be crystal clear. The reason I don't like Donald Trump's got nothing to do with him grabbing women by the pussy or golden showers in Moscow or whatever, or even to some extent the whole transfer of power thing. Like I'm kind of like, well, he's trying it on, kind of that has less impact for me than it does for others. But for me, it comes down to his policy, his policy preferences.
Well, that's why I asked that follow-up question, right? Like, can you? There's policy things that fall on either side. That the policy is not always clear, black and white, good or bad, right? Like, for example, the Roe versus Wade, right? Or things like that. It just depends on which side of the fence you're on, and much like my like, I know it's important to you and it's good to be understood, but my point is more going back to, like, say, the UK riots, that all these little things, like Trump is a populist, right? And all these little things he's trying to feed off are simmering away in different variants of truth and veracity in the actual communities, right? Whether it's in the UK and these issues around the loss of identity and immigration, or family planning rights and abortion and all that kind of stuff in America, whatever it is, like that's what interests me. Having like a discussion about those enabling factors, because if you just go Tommy Robinson and Trump are these crazy people who are inciting violence, and that's all it is, right? And I'm not even going to entertain anything else. I'm not playing their game. Then you're missing out those like underlying factors that, you know, is a symptom, not a cause, right? Like the rise of these people are just symptoms of these other issues in the community. And you have to find a way to talk about them without going apeshit.
But I think just fundamentally, like, you can't go and look at part of what he's got to say and then, by the way, let's have the conversation in the way that he wants to have the conversation. Let's just accept, you know, as for granted that, yes, Kamala was the border czar. She was the one responsible for everything. And yes, she did support, you know, defund the police because Donald Trump said it, you know, and that, you know, yes, actually, Donald Trump is a respected tough guy, you know, on international affairs, like, because he's told us that, right? You know, and of course, you know, Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump was president. Absolutely. Like, you know, because why do we think that? Because Donald Trump's told us that. I'm not going to, like, that for me is like, I'm not going to bloody have dinner at the table Donald Trump set for us. All right? That's so I think that's why I'm pushing back quite strongly against, like, any notion that Donald Trump, like, should even, like, and that's a completely different, if you want to have a conversation, well, why do people in Ohio, you know, we've just read Hillbilly Elegy, why do people in Ohio not want to, you know, don't buy into, like, you know, technocrats from Washington telling them how they should live their lives or what good economic policies are for them. You know, that's fine. I'm very open to that conversation, right? That for me is, like, very interesting. But I don't want to have that conversation, and I utterly refuse to have that conversation in any framing where Donald Trump is somehow the solution, or where he's like, yeah, he's right. You know, actually, yeah, this part of the Donald Trump, like, because
you got it.
It's not right.
I understand, and I agree that he's not fit for office. But you're missing the middle on this one. You know, you're not. I
don't know. I am.
You, by not wanting to you know, have dinner at the table that he's set, or using that analogy, you're missing the beat here, because half the country wants to have dinner at that table, right?
Some figures, and I would put Tommy Robinson in this category too. Some figures, they are not coming to the conversation in good faith. So I think reliant on us, like, if we want to engage in good faith in the conversations that others are having, you have to also rely on that those people are coming to it at good faith. And I don't think Donald Trump is, and I don't think Tommy Robinson is.
I tend to agree. And just to finish up this segment, Andy, Roger is not a registered Republican, so
I actually do think Donald Trump's going to lose the election, and I think that's going to, like, seal the deal for, like, a reckoning of, like, yeah, okay, we need to, like, fight against these fucking crazy people, you know?
Yeah.
Who and there's this cult of the personality. It's a bit like the Death of Stalin. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't. No.
Oh, it's like a dark comedy, but it's just basically where Stalin dies, but, like, they're just waiting for the first mover to stop praising Stalin, so because, like, they all know he's, like, a fucking crazy dictator or whatever, and it's all a power play to, like, become the next leader. And it's this dark comedy of, like, who's going to be the first person to show some skin that, like, hey, you know, things weren't that great under Stalin, sort of thing. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Donald Trump. Like, people, normal mainstream Republicans kind of have to say that you know, Donald Trump is great, but they don't actually believe it.
There you go. I think we'll let's pivot away from the election. We're talking about crimes against humanity. Can we talk a second about the Olympic opening ceremony?
So we're a little bit late to the party, partially interrupted by the riots in the UK, because I think we were thinking of doing a mid-Olympics episode, but we missed that memo. So, gosh, that was, like, feels like an eternity ago. But yeah, it was kind of just say, like, starting with the opening ceremony, it does feel a little bit like this Olympics just had a lot of little things go wrong, including that it was pissing down with rain on the opening ceremony, and they decided to have it on boats in the River Seine, and it just didn't kind of work. Also, I might just say all of the like vocal elements of the performances during the opening ceremony, they're all out of sync. They just seem to like not get the technical side right, which was really driving me nuts. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't a fan of it. I've got to be honest. I prefer the traditional, Olympic Stadium opening ceremony.
Yeah, I was watching it with the kids, right, and that was a mistake. I felt like this particular opening ceremony should have come with like a, MA 15 plus rating, because there was just too much weird shit going on, right? Like it created too many questions. It's like, Daddy, why is there like this weird Papa Smurf in like a G-string on? What's going on?
It reminds me of when I went to we were in San Francisco, and they had the the gay parade or whatever, the gay march or whatever. And I thought, we're in freaking San Francisco on like the highlight of isn't that the like Monday to Friday in San Francisco? Yeah, but like it's the most famous, probably gay sort of pride city in the world, right? And we happen to be in San Francisco when there's the gay pride parade, so we've got to go and see that. Except that I went there with my son, who's, at the time was 11, or maybe not even 11, maybe 12, maybe only 10.
He came out of that parade a man.
There were all these like fat naked dudes.
Why were they fat? There wasn't like Mardi Gras where they're all like ripped.
No, they were like just, but like when I say like naked, like I mean literally like their dicks hanging out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were like in the crowd, so they weren't performers or people, like they were just literally like dudes.
That can't be right.
No, 100%.
But they have in public indecency
not
laws,
on that day in San Francisco.
You can't just walk around. You can't just like stand behind someone with your dick out.
There was at least, I reckon, there was at least 10 dudes with their dicks out,
in the
nothing
crowd
on
behind you.
Absolutely, just like they were spectators, or they were sort of walking around.
God.
They weren't in the parade. And I can confirm it actually happened because my son said to me, "Why were there all these naked dudes?" Yeah.
Anyway, this sounds like a very unsafe environment. Like you're describing like a gay mosh pit with everyone's like naked gay mosh pit.
So not to distract us from the Olympics, but it did bring back memories.
All right. Well, maybe the opening ceremony wasn't that bad then. But look, it was just very it's very weird. Like it was kind of like a trying too hard thing, So this weird character that's going all over town and trying to. They treated it like a short film, right? And they even had like a cartoon break with the minions like halfway through, and it was like, is this an ad? Is this an advertisement? No, it's part of the Olympics. It's this weird mixed media like sensory experience of an opening ceremony, and it just didn't work in my opinion, and they tried to shove too much kind of like haute couture and risque kind of like sexual elements into it. Like I just don't think, when you think about something like the Olympics, right, I just don't think it provided that universal kind of coming together that I think the opening ceremony, that's in the spirit of the opening ceremony.
Yeah, I agree. I think the rain definitely didn't help. I think, to be fair to the organisers, they took a risk. I just think the risk didn't pay off. But
it was a French fuck you, though. Like that's what I feel was happening. They're sitting around the writers' room, and they're just like, we're French. We're not gonna do some crappy stadium gig. We're gonna just show them
But I think it was premised on the notion that like we're gonna show off our city, right? We're gonna just the footage is gonna be amazing. But instead, it was just like, here's this fucking rainy, shitty place that you would not want to be, and it didn't work. But it does remind me just with the Olympics, I must admit, I don't feel we've actually had a proper Olympics since London, actually, because I don't know,
it's because of COVID, right? Tokyo was
COVID. Tokyo definitely was fucked over, but even Rio was a little bit. I don't know. I just feel like that didn't have the punch that. So you go back to London, but I'm just thinking of their opening ceremony, their opening and closing ceremonies. I think
I remember it.
Oh, they were amazing. Like they just used all of the pop culture that UK has to bring. But what I loved about it is that the 2012 Olympics came after the Beijing Olympics, and the Beijing Olympics opening and closing ceremonies were like, couldn't be more different to the London ones, right? Because in Beijing it was all about see how like great it is when we can get like lots of people and get them all to do exactly the same thing. Like it was this very like, see how compliant we are as a society. See our drums, like in our ink, like we're all doing
totally
it
in
perfectly.
control here.
Yeah, like and I just felt like the greatest thing about the London opening ceremony and probably their closing ceremony too was just such a like antithesis of that. It was like, hey, here's all our fucking amazing culture. Like here's Jimmy Page, here's Mr. Bean, here's like the Spice Girls, here's David Beckham. Like I don't know, just it was, and I don't think Paris, like obviously they're almost rivals in some ways. Yeah, I don't think their kind of pop culture kind of landed.
Yeah, but like you said, they took a risk, and I guess you have to commend for that, right? I mean, I just love how they spent all this money trying to clean up the Seine, right? And then it's obviously like billions of dollars to clean it, and then in typical Parisian kind of attitudes, they're like, oh no, and they organized this mass movement to throw your shit in the Seine, or actually to shit in the Seine to kind of not clean it up because they were against wasting all this taxpayer money to clean it up so that they could swim in there. And then they found all these like high levels of E. coli, aka French shit, in there. And there's all this like, if you type in athletes vomiting, there's all these people that have like they've gone in the river or been exposed to the water, and they are like throwing up from the experience. Man, like talk about like how hard is doing a triathlon to begin with, but now you've got to throw in like this food poisoning that you get from inhaling this feces water. It's just so French to be like, no, even after we spend the money to clean up the Seine, I'm gonna organize a movement to shit in there.
I just find Paris is just such an unforgiving city if you're on the wrong side of it. Like it's a beautiful city in terms of like some of the architecture and some of the higher upscale neighborhoods and all that, but there's a lot of toughness. I don't know, hard.
Yeah, inner city.
Yeah, it's very brutal.
But I mean, the shared spaces are nicer than most cities.
Parks and stuff, yeah, they're good, but only in summer. Like in winter, they're shit. It's just these just places. Okay, so let's talk about the Olympic Games. So should we do a little bit of a tour around some of the highlights of this Olympics first?
Well, I think we should start off as good patriots, right? And I think that when you watch the Olympics, right, you kind of forget about it, and then you're back into it. And it's really nice because I think it's like a monoculture. It's a return to like a monoculture kind of attitude. Everyone's talking about it, everyone's watching it. And that's very comforting. I think that's really, really comforting. It brings people together in your family and then across like, work and friends. But it always, like as an Australian, how many people do we have now? 26 mil?
Oh, something like that.
Something like that, right? Like under 30 million as a population, the whole of Australia, right? We send like 500 athletes, and we've literally come fourth out of all the countries. Fourth, 26 million. I mean, come on, like, how can you not be proud of that as an achievement, right? Like to as this little island nation to achieve such prolific gold medals, right? Like I think that I just want to kind of like say that we should never take that for granted because that is amazing.
Okay, well, let's take that and say, well, we're better than the US, China, and Japan in terms of
per capita,
our achievement. But at the same time, like I do think we have an outsized interest in the Olympics. Like Australia, we invest more, like per capita, in the Olympics. We have more. We have more leisure time to do things like learn how to, I don't know, what did we win some of the weird gold medals? Like, just take swimming, right? The fact that every single Australian does some form of swimming squads, by the age of like 12, means, yeah, we should be winning fucking gold medals. Most like 3/4 of the world's population can't swim, yet we have this kind of national tradition of like sending all kids to not only learn to swim, but like to actually do proper swimming strokes. So
we do live by the coast and around beaches.
Yeah, I know, but like I don't think that's necessarily. I think there's a cultural factor too. But I might also say that I think some of our investments in like athletes are quite strategic too. Like, can I just say that like definitely our women athletes outperform our men athletes in terms of like the gold medal haul. And let's be honest, if you want to make some strategic investments to win gold medals, you would double down on women. You know, like the competition from other countries or less developed countries is not as strong among their female athletes. So we're a better female sporting nation than we are a male sporting nation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, I agree. I don't think that diminishes anything that has been achieved.
Such a workster.
Hey, fake. Don't hate the game. Don't hate the player, hate the game. But you could admit that that's pretty, like, the fact that fourth out of all the countries, like, regardless of investment, right? Like, you can...
Yeah.
I mean, swimming, obviously, but, you know, the good thing about the Olympics, though, is that you see all different type of athletes, right? Like, you can see that the gifts that you might have, you know, genetically manifest in different ways, right? Like, you know, a gymnast looks very different from a swimmer, and you know, the rowers look very different from, like, you know, sprinters and things like that. So I really like that part of it, right? Like, and I think that is that's really cool to see, right? Like, different. It's good for everyone to see, like, to know that there are different body types, and we all have our gifts and things like that.
I'm probably more into the Olympics than the average person, in the sense that obviously, like, we grew up, our formative years were during, like, the Sydney Olympics and growing up, and we were kind of at that age where we were sort of old enough to really understand the Olympics and what it was, and actually be able to engage with the Olympics when it was in Sydney, but still young enough, I think, for it to be almost magical. And, like, we weren't cynical about it, because I think, like, you know, when you hear someone say, "Oh, it's a waste of taxpayers' money" and all that, I was like, fuck, you're too cynical. Like, can't we just dream can't we just, like, get into this and not complain about how much it costs?
Save that kind of negative attitude for the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah. So I think we were kind of at the right age, actually, in some ways. But then, like, I also went to the Beijing Olympics as well, and I had some good experience. Oh, I saw heaps of good stuff. Like, but I had some really good experiences there, because the difference between the Beijing Olympics and the Sydney Olympics is that all the good Aussie events you could actually get tickets to. Like, and I think my highlight, mainly because it came out of, like, total randomness, but I was in the stadium when Steve Hooker won his gold medal in pole vault, and it was the same night when, like, I think it was Usain Bolt, and, like, there was heaps of other, like, track and field events, but like the pole vault with Steve Hooker was just like this slow burn. Like, it was going all night, and I was watching it. It's like, oh, like, because I had no idea. I don't know. Maybe he was in the running. Like, maybe he was like he was in medal contention, and I just didn't know it or whatever. But, like, in my mind, like, usually for these track and field events, you don't back an Aussie to sort of win. And then, so I was just sort of watching it. Oh, he'll get out eventually. Like, he'll be, if he gets in the top 10, that would be great. And then he just, like, hung around. And then he got the the final thing. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then by that time, like, the whole stadium had cleared out. Like, it was like, I think even the final event of the night, and they were still, like, going. And I just remember hanging around, and it was quite an amazing experience. I remember him doing the lap at the bird's nest in Beijing, and, you know, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, you know, the Aussie contingent sort of going down to the fence to see him and all that. The other thing I remember was being in, I kind of cheated, and I was there for the swimming, and I saw a few gold medals won by, I think Stephanie Rice won a couple of gold medals. And I had the shittest seats. Like, I was, like, up in the middle of nowhere. But I actually just, like, did that whole dumb tourist thing, and I actually, like, walked to, like, the premium seats. And I was just hoping, I hope no one, like, I was sitting in someone else's seats, but I was just hoping that no one would, like, this would be okay somehow, magically. And I just picked the one seat that no one was sitting in, and I was good the whole match.
Really?
Sorry, the whole night. And I saw a few gold medals. That was actually in the morning, because I think the morning sessions were the gold medal ones. And turns out I was actually sitting, like, literally behind Stephanie Rice's family. Like, that's how primo my position was.
You really wandered off.
It was way off the spectrum, but yeah, that was. Oh, and plus, like, I went and saw the the Boomers. No, it was actually the is it the Opals? Is that the
Opals,
women's? Yeah. So they were playing the USA in the I think it was the gold medal match. They didn't win, but I was sitting behind the backboard, and I had all of these fucking crazy people around me. I had literally the dream team behind me. I don't know if it was Kobe Bryant or it was one of those, like, it was like that kind of caliber, right? I had Steve Waugh next to me over here, and then I had the Awesome Foursome over there. It was like, I was just like, oh, fucking hell, how did I get down here? Again, that was another, like, shifty sort of, change my
Doesn't surprise
situation.
me, Andy.
Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me. All right, let's bring some structure to this, okay? Let's do a return fire situation. We're going to go highlights, all right? So you give me one highlight or a memorable moment, and then I'll return, and let's do a couple.
All right. Well, I think there's definitely one highlight that we're going to talk about, so I'm not going to give it here, but just watch this space. I'm going to go the 14-year-old skateboarder winning a gold medal. I can't remember her name, but she just seemed like she's just this like young, sort of humble young lass, and she won gold. And I think she gave she's given a few interviews, and she just comes across very just a really delightful sort of character. So I'm going to go that one.
Ah, okay. So the skateboarding.
I didn't actually watch it. I just saw her interview afterwards, and she impressed me with her, lack of being arrogant. So Arisa True is the one I'm talking about.
All right, I'll go my next highlight, and I can't go past Anthony Ammirati. This is the Italian pole vaulter who went viral, or a lot of coverage, because he went to execute his pole vault, and on the way down, his essentially his junk hit the pole vault bar in a really gratuitous fashion. So his dick kind of like pushed the pole vault off and jiggled gratuitously in slow motion. And so he's known as someone who lost in his Olympic trial, but also won because he's got a massive dong. And it just made me think. It was this glorious kind of moment in time. It was like, thank God for high definition video, because they slowed this pole vault down and they've replayed it. They've made it into TikToks. And, like, of all the things that you're going to be criticized for, like having a massive schlong that gets caught on the pole vault bar, it's not a bad one, right? And I think I just I love it, because if this was a woman or, whatever, and like her breasts hit it or something, it would just be like, you just couldn't do it. But because it's a dude, because it's an Italian guy, and he's like, you can just have this fun with it, right? And like, he probably doesn't feel great about this situation, but it's hilarious. Like, it's like, I feel like it's like a victimless crime. And there's a bit where, we're going to talk about Raygun, right? And I think this is like a good alternative version of that, of like how, again, is actually quite an embarrassing thing to be shown millions of the time in slow definition, like your genitals being like jiggling around on the bar, like zoomed in. This could be equally embarrassing and like life ruining for this guy, but it hasn't turned out this way. And so it's just, I'm really interested in exploring that.
The other one we had was the Turkish shooter, and the contrast between him just like literally whipping out this gun like with his hand in his pocket and going and winning the silver, and then like you see all these other like, I don't know, futuristic like Blade style kind of
Blade Runner
with their tools and whatever else. That there's something in that seemed to take the world by storm, as it were.
I think it was his facial expression too, but I think everyone wants to see the kind of natural talent, right? Like, and I think that was the case, right?
Mm. Any other highlights for you?
I suppose, not a highlight, but I think that the controversy around the boxing was definitely something that, was ripe for a bit of dinner table discussion. So Iman Khalif, she went on to win the gold medal for the women's 66 kg boxing. And obviously a bit of controversy there, and it was like a little bit of a masterclass in how things are complicated, right? Like things aren't always what they seem. And when people are so primed and so kind of already pent up to jump in, right? They're like, oh, we got one. We finally got an example of of someone who's taking advantage of these this new work culture, and there's a man beating up a woman like on international TV. And when you start to peel it back, it's like the ultimate kind of example of life. Things are just way more complex, right? And you're not working with all the information. You're not taking into all this stuff. You're making a split decision to suit a narrative that you are passionate about, right? And I think talking again about how nowadays you have the Olympics plus social media, some of this stuff is like life-changing for these people, right? And I don't think that was always the case back in the day. Like it wasn't that you didn't risk as much going to the Olympics. But now, not only do these athletes have to deal with the pressure of performing, but they got the freaking pressure of like becoming a meme or going viral or like having their freaking life ruined if something embarrassing happens or something controversial happens.
Yeah, I sort of agree with those sentiments. I think that one of the things I noticed that happened is that people very quickly fell to whatever camp they fell in, right? So if you were pro-trans and sort of slash whatever, I don't know, gender... I don't think trans is the right word because I don't think she is trans. That's not the thing, but I think you know what I mean. The more sympathetic voices defaulted to their perspectives, and then you had all those who say, oh, okay, actually, here's a good example of like how we shouldn't be like accommodating of trans people in sports. So this is our like case study. So but I don't think people really, like, in some ways, the beauty of this one is that it is like one of those ones that's in the middle. Like it's probably evenly weighted for the perspective of, well, for one, like she is actually a woman. She lives her life as a woman. She was born a woman. Her birth certificate is female. She, in every other definition of, if I understand correctly, has some like intersex kind of characteristics, which aren't like mean she's not 100% kind of quite one way or the other, but that's like an actual
that's what I mean.
Condition,
right? Like it's
and she didn't choose it, and not only that, but like now her whole like if she's lived her whole life as a woman, and now this whole thing gets questioned, and everyone accepts her as a woman. No one's questioned that, and then like for her sport, she gets questioned. But then on the other hand, you do have to genuinely consider, well, is there any credence to the notion that, well, if you take performance-enhancing drugs, you have equivalent, or she has equivalent benefits from a physiological perspective as someone taking performance-enhancing drugs, right? And you have to consider, like, well, it's certainly not her choice, but, like, this is the thing with sport. Like, how do you, like, okay, like, yeah, I mean, do I need some kind of, like, handicap advantage to support me to, like, if I want to play in the NBA, like, because I'm not tall enough or athletic enough? Like, do I need some kind of special equalizing advantage to help me? Because it's not fair that, like, only...
It's a tricky one, man. Like, I feel like this is a classic case. That's why I brought it up. Of, you know how when you do like legal studies and they talk about how like imagine a car's driving down the road and this car is painted on one side red and on the other side blue, right? And depending on which side of the street you're on, as you see it pass by, you identify the car as blue or red. But in reality, it's both, right? And it's your perspective is where you are situated as the car drives by, right? And like this is literally that playing out in real life, right? She's got the X chromosome, she's got the Y chromosome. Depending on your position and how you are kind of primed to react to that, you'll make a certain call on it. And like you said, you'll have a different view. My personal view is that like, and it's one a little bit more out of curiosity, and I wish there wasn't so much human impact at the end of this question, but it was more, my view is that if scientifically there is an advantage in a combat sport like boxing by having that Y chromosome, and they can prove that, maybe they can't, but if they can prove that, then there's a discussion worth having. But if they can't, then fair game, right? Like I revert back to my more crude heuristic, which or litmus test, which is does she have a cock? And if not, by choice or otherwise, then play on, baby.
She's got a large clitoris, that's all.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
But
can she fuck someone with it? Has to be a working cock.
But another angle here as well is like there's like weight classes as well, right?
Yeah, but that does, yeah.
what does that, I mean, like, what does that count for? Like, does that count for anything? Like, so I know that normally, like, the perception of, like, a man, you know, standing over a woman, like, and beating a woman, like, that some of that imagery is, I think, leverages notions of, like, the average man is much bigger than the average woman. But in this particular situation, now, notwithstanding there might be compositional differences, there might be muscle mass or whatever, but, like, at the same time, like, it's not a lot of, look, let's just say that virtually everyone who has commented on this either way has taken this to suit their political / ideological perspectives and don't give two flying fucks about Iman Khalif.
Yeah, and I do really feel horrible for how she's had to experience all of this. It's they could have handled it so much better, so much better, right? And the truth is, I think that boxing federations and associations are, you know, dodgy by nature, and I think that's partly the problem. Yeah. All
right. Just before we get to, I think we should finish with our friend Raygun, but just before we get to that, I do want to maybe be a bit nostalgic about the Sydney Olympics. And, you know, we alluded to it before, like, we grew up in Sydney. Our sort of coming of age experience from, well, I think, was the Sydney Olympics. And so I think the Olympics, like, as an institution, have this special place in, like, the hearts of people our age, particularly, you know, growing up in Sydney. But also, I feel like the Olympics have this, they've carved out this, like, space where they're kind of almost like a religion. They're that, like, you hear that, you watch the opening ceremony and they've got all these rituals and, oh, here's the flag, and here's the hymn, and here's the, you know, here's the Olympic anthem, and now we're going to read the Olympic creed, and it's like all this fucking, like, it's like you're at a Catholic fucking church ceremony or something, right? It's you're just waiting for the someone to come out with the what's that smoke stuff that they have? Anyway, but anyway, it's and I actually think that's a good, like, story of rituals, like the power rituals in some ways. Like, it gives it this closer to God sort of feeling. But, like, maybe whether riffing on the Olympics, as in the Sydney Olympics, or just the Olympics in general, like, how do you feel about them? Like, do you feel that they are still this really aspirational thing that, like, that's really valuable, or do you think it's kind of like we're gonna at some point in the future say, oh, that was that thing in the, like, 20th century that we were all obsessed with, but we're rightfully now over it?
It's you are right that it is hard to separate your point of view from your experience, right? And that you and I grew up in a period, and like you said, we were in that right age to engage in a non-cynical way with something like the Olympics, you know, so we have that, right? It's almost like your first childhood concert or whatever. So it's hard to kind of separate that, but I do think one of the reasons why the Olympics is so important is because, in my mind anyway, it's because it's a collective cooperation, right? It's a moment in time, and you could kind of say the Eurovision has this kind of impact too. It's like this idea that we are all respecting our national identities, and we're all coming together to compete under the, you know, umbrella of sportsmanship. And essentially what the Olympics is at its heart, it's like the true version of a meritocracy, right? It's like, it doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are, how much money you've come from. Well, I mean, it kind of does, but you know what I mean? The bar is still 1.8 meters high and you still have to jump the fuck over it, right? And so I think that, like, that idea is, to me, still very powerful, right? And I think that the world stopping and forming and coming together is very powerful. And, like, you think about, like, things like, you know, like gladiators back in the day, or coming together for Greek plays and all this kind of stuff. I do feel like these cultural moments provide really untold benefits that are hard to quantify. Like the fact that you have a shared experience with someone in Nigeria or whatever it is, right? Or Korea or America. Like, I think these things actually help bring us together and unite us as, you know, a global citizen, right? Like, then that's the very lofty view. And I think it's kind of, like it can, you can be cynical about it, but I do think there is something there. Like there's few opportunities to engage in a monoculture nowadays, and the Olympics provides this pause every 4 years to do that, right? Well, it could be 2 years with the Winter Olympics, but you know what I mean? Like, I still think that's valuable, right? I really do.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm probably more into the Olympics than most people. Although the time difference thing, like, didn't work for me this Olympics, but
yeah.
I just find that, as I said, I've been to 2 Olympics, Sydney and Beijing, and I just have found that it just does something to a city at that time, at that moment, that is so magical, and that isn't replicated like anywhere else in any other setting. And I know that, like, one of the sort of debates that would be had is, oh no, but like the Football World Cup is like, that's actually where it's at. But I just think the winner takes all nature of the Football World Cup, and the fact that there is literally only like 5 countries that are going to win it.
Yeah.
And there's no mini battles, like there's no mini successes that you can have within the context of the Football World Cup, that it doesn't have the same power as the Olympic Games. I mean, you mentioned about, we were 4th, but look at our population size. Well, I can tell you every other country that's like a small population is doing that same calculation. Oh, look, we did better than the US because we've got, lower population.
Yeah, but that 4th isn't adjusted.
No, I know, but like, I just mean like in terms of every country can see some form of success in the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that there's so many different sports, it's so open, it's so inclusive, right? And I just think there's something really powerful about that. I think it's got, like, in terms of rituals and I think that whole piece around like the Olympic flame and like let's have the torch relay and like let's light it in some special way. Like, even if you're not into sport, like, you can buy into that stuff. Like, and it's got more power. It's more powerful than the Football World Cup. If you're into like soccer and football and stuff, like, obviously you're going to be more into that, and that's fine. And it is like probably a bigger event in terms of like bums on seats, but like in terms of power, in terms of impact, I don't know. I think the Olympics is still, maybe to put it another way, it would be actually really disappointing if in 50 years' time, like, the Olympics kind of just faded away, right? It just ceased to be. Yeah.
I just need Donald Trump to clean out the IOC. That's all we need.
By the way, I remember in the early days of YouTube, because as I said, I was in Beijing, and I remember uploading, one of my first experiences with YouTube was trying to upload like a video of me at the Olympics, like not performing obviously, but as a spectator. I filmed some footage or whatever. I can't even remember what event. Oh, God, the fucking IOC took my video down on YouTube. Like, are you kidding me? I'm a fucking spectator, like, trying to share this thing, and then the fucking IOC take my video down. Anyway, so I don't like the IOC. But I was going to say, like, we haven't talked about how Brisbane is the host of 2032. And I actually am really excited about the LA games, because I kind of think they will breathe a bit of life into it that Paris didn't breathe into it. I kind of feel like LA is going to do the whole, like, oh yeah, okay, we've got a good street culture. We've got like the celebrity power.
Oh yeah.
They'll get like Axl Rose to come and sing, November Rain at the closing ceremony or something. It's going to be good.
I thought the closing ceremony, when Tom Cruise was on the flying wire down and then he was on the motorbike, the scene where he pulls out on the motorbike with a flag on the back, that was pretty cool. Like, that was very cheesy Hollywood, and I had time for that. But look, we've got to talk about, my comments about the fact that really the Olympics is a global act of cooperation, coordination, but also ultimately is a meritocracy, right? And I think that is a really good segue into our old friend B-Girl Raygun. For those who haven't seen it.
So you don't think she'll see a home Olympics? Is that what you're saying in Brisbane 2032?
It was so bad they've cancelled the category. It's not. How cruel is it? They are not. They tried breakdancing for the first time in Paris, and they're now not continuing it in LA. One of the places where there's such a big street culture around this stuff. It just doesn't make sense. But for those who haven't seen it, you must have, forgotten your password to your socials because it's everywhere. But we had an Australian, as part of the Australian breakdancing team, we had B-Girl Raygun, who was a 36-year-old, I believe, university professor.
Yep, from Macquarie University.
Your university.
My university, yeah.
Yeah. So we got to get her on the pod. We've got contacts there. She rocked an incredible routine. It was filled with, I would describe it as Australiana moves to the max. And it has gone, it's probably the most viral event that I can think of. Because it's global. It's literally global, and everyone's talking about it. Basically, it was a incredibly awkward, dismal routine, a breakdancing routine that was just, it was one of those situations where you just can't believe what you're watching. She received a score of 0 for all of her rounds. And now, just to clarify, in breakdancing, that means that you've lost to your dueling partner every time. So it's not that you've got 0 out of 10. It's just you've lost every interaction. But the thing was this, it actually still, to my mind, it still makes me laugh when I see it. And I probably have seen the routine, I don't know, at least 30 times. And it left people wondering, how the hell is this Australia's best female breakdancer? All right. How did you feel when you watched it? Because it came very late in the games too. I think it was like the last day or the second last day or something.
Yeah. I have two thoughts. I think it's actually good that the Olympics have a space for shit athletes. Like it's the Eddie Deal phenomenon. Yeah. It's what's the it's like the Jamaican bobsledders, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that's good. I think that's part of the spirit of the Olympics.
Eddie the Eel didn't have a doctorate in water science.
Swimming. Well, okay.
In fact, I don't think he ever had access to water, the element of water in his home country.
So I think in the context of this, I'm very happy that the Olympics can give us a moment like this. I think that's fine, but let's just call a spade. She was not good. There was no redeeming sort of attributes to her performance. And I think you would probably, if you were, and I've seen so this is the thing, it all comes now to all the aftermath and all the conversations. There's revelations that there were other breakdancers that could have been in that, that never got the chance to compete, weren't, or either didn't, for whatever reason, didn't get there, but she got there, but they're actually much better than her, which is itself that raises legitimate questions. And then the other part of this is because she is an academic, and apparently her academic studies relate to deep philosophical questions about breakdancing and power dynamics and the and it's and there's this whole piece about cultural appropriation, and
she was hitting the triangle points of a cultural appropriation. Who is she insulting? African American street culture or Indigenous Australian street culture?
There was a lot of stuff going on. So I think in some ways, if she was just a happy-go-lucky, randomly found herself there because almost like a Stephen Bradbury moment, found herself at the Olympics, and people would get behind that. But I think then she's got these other things going on where she's oh, but you take this seriously, as your life's work. But the other piece of this puzzle that I'm interested in is that, where to from here, right? So I think she literally has a fork in the road before her right now. In fact, the clock's ticking, where if she makes, the right moves, she can, totally morph this into, she can become, a celebrity, a household name. She can become, the affable aunt who's everyone loves because she's cool. She breakdances, she's shit at it, but she has it a go, and she's funny. She's people like her. She's, almost a mix between kind of Steve Irwin and sort of just a little bit dorky, but owns it. And she can go and do the tour. She can go on
it's tricky.
Jimmy Fallon.
I mean, she's going to do I wonder if she's going to do the tour, because there was a brief moment where I thought that she was just shrugging it off and she was going to be kind of a a mascot, essentially, like a comedy kind of icon. She'd do the Australian circuit. She'd be on the panels everywhere. But I think it's that word you use, whether there would be some kind of redeemable element to it. So I think that, like, the problem is now, okay, story time. I was cleaning out my room, I think, last year, and I found our Year 10 yearbook from our high school. And when I looked at my last few pages, you know how people sign it, everyone in the class signs and they write a message for you. My messages were all about how good my breakdancing was. Apparently, I was breakdancing at the Year 10 formal. And I've got all these comments about people, and I had totally forgotten that I even was engaged in that culture. And let me tell you, I remember being down the PCYC in Parramatta when they did breakdancing stuff, and there were 8-year-old girls that were more competent than B-Girl Raygun in, you know, the late 1990s. You know, I just think that it is an insult. Like, it really, really, truly is, like, very insulting, that performance, right? It's a disservice to the kind of art of this kind of dance, you know? And I think that is a legitimate kind of grievance for people who are in that culture, right? And when the Australian kind of coaches double down and they say, no, she is an excellent athlete and she is the best Australia has to offer. Like, she is the best female Australian breakdancer right now. Like, I just don't think it's the right move, right? So I think because of those elements, it's going to be a little bit harder for her to take advantage of this, you know, because she's not like the tool girl who can, like, lean into it and make it become an online personality, right? Like, this, she's representing the country, you know. I just think, it is, there's a legitimate grievance for people who actually break dance.
I've just had a thought.
Give it to me.
Hotcha girl, Raygun, MMA battle.
I'd actually put some money on Raygun. I think she's got the reach because she's taller, and, you know, she's definitely got core strength. Like, there are some moves that she's obviously can do that the general public can't. She just makes it look really hard.
Can I just say, like, to your point around, like, this is respected, like, this form of dance is respected by a certain group of people, and her performance therefore is, like, seen as disrespectful among a very narrow group of people. But that's very narrow. Everyone else is just, like, finds it funny.
It's disrespectful to the male, like, to the Australian male breakdancer.
That's a very narrow group of people.
No, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about the one on the Olympic team. Did you see that guy?
But just to make clear, like, what I'm saying is that there's a very small number of people who will see disrespect in this. Everyone else will see it as, like, a bit of fun, or they'll see it as, oh, look, she gave it a go, like, good on her. And the very, 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 very slither minority will be thinking, oh, this is, like, actually, this is disrespectful to what we're all about, right? And
how did it happen?
No, but
how
it
did she
doesn't
qualify,
matter.
kind of thing?
It doesn't matter. People are more glad that they got to have a bit of fun with it than they are in any way worried or concerned about the better athletes who missed out, right? So I think what she should do is she should get an agent. She should book, like, while she's on top of a game in terms of, like, people are talking about it, book, like, the speaker circuit in the US, because Jimmy Fallon had, like, a whole skit with someone impersonating her. So get on the show, get on the actual show, play up the Aussie thing, be like Steve-O, and then come back to Australia, because that's going to fizzle out. That's not going to last. But then come back to Australia and be just like reinvent yourself. Like, be like, okay, I'm going to be on the project, like, every other week. Maybe I'm going to, like, learn stand-up comedy or something. I'm just going to, like, I'm going to reinvent myself, but I'm going to use this profile, start a podcast, and, you know, whatever it is, right?
I'd offer one suggestion. Take some money, get a coach, actually learn how to break dance. Because let me tell you, like, I'm serious though. She goes on, you know, Jimmy Fallon or whatever. She does the same routine, but in the middle of it, she busts out a windmill or a head spin. All is forgiven, right? Like, she could do that, and then it's like, okay, she was being artistic.
She has to.
She's got to mix up a little bit. She's got to show.
No, she's got to transition away. This can't
be this can't be your life's work, right? Like, you can't, like.
Why not? Can I just say, to be fair, she's a much better breakdancer than I am, put it that way. So, I'm not going to give her zero credit.
That is not the.
I'm just going to
She's
say,
an Olympic athlete, man.
I know. But
She was on the boat next to. You talked about you being stuck in between like our Olympic rowing team and like the dream team behind you. She was on the fucking boat with all our gold medalists.
All right. Can I just say, as an aside, if you're genuinely like, and maybe this has some explanatory power in why she was at the Olympics. If you genuinely want street cred as a breakdancer, are you seriously going to get dressed up in the tracksuit, the Aussie tracksuit pants, and then go and represent Australia at the Olympics? Like, that's such a like white person thing to do.
Oh, she looked like she was going to play in the 2020 Big Bash.
she totally looked like Kath and Kim, Kath or Kim. Yeah.
What can you say? But at the same time, I do have time for some comedy. But again, like her mental state wouldn't be great right now. Like, I mean,
no, but that's what she's got to lean into it. She's got to go, oh well, all right, little bit embarrassing, but all right, I'm gonna fucking.
No, man, this is embarrassment. This is ego annihilation on a scale of which you cannot possibly comprehend.
Well, I think the ego annihilation's not on her actual breakdancing performance. I think the ego annihilation's on the if she's an academic that writes about breakdancing and that's her like thing, then this just.
Yeah, how's she going to work anymore? How's she going to?
This is her identity that she's and the fact that she's now being like criticized in that world as being like basically
Uncle Tom
stealing their kind of culture and doing it shit, and then like that's like a double whammy. But anyway,
but again, it's a moment in time. It's something that has united us all.
My bet is that Raygun. We will see more of Raygun in the future.
100%.
Just,
she's on Koshi. She'll be on Koshi's show.
She'll get, I reckon she will get an agent.